Hello, I'm Ajahn Sona. This is Birken Forest Monastery's live stream and an opportunity for questions and answers. So let us begin, Pia.
Ajahn, I wonder if you can remind us again of why we select certain questions on our live stream and why others may not be asked during this time.
Yes, I'd like to clear up the mystery. It's because we're making a compendium of questions and answers, a kind of an encyclopedia of Buddhism. And we are collecting all of these sessions of Q&A over every week, and we don't want to just simply answer the same questions again and again. So if the question has been answered, 30 weeks ago, then we will probably skip over it and try to answer something that hasn't been answered before. Now, this is all collected and categorized and in a very orderly fashion. And it's available, the collection is available to us. I mean, perhaps it's not complete yet because we'll continue to answer questions, but I thought it'd be nice to do at least 500 questions and answers, and probably we've passed that mark before. So that you can have a reference to it. You can go back and find out that your question may have already been answered in some ways. And this is for audiences in the future as well. And that reference is down below in the comment section, in the description, in the description below. So check it out, and due to the miracle of computers and internet stuff, I better not embarrass myself, but I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So anyway, you get the idea. Let's go back to my field of expertise, Buddhism. Okay, now Pia, first question.
Thank you, Ajahn. Our first question is from the live chat from Echnoderm. Dear Venerable, do you have advice for someone aspiring to uphold the 8 precepts for the rest of their life?
Well, there are people who do that, lay people who undertake 8 precepts. It's not a requirement by any means. It's something that the Buddha thought was a good thing, perhaps do it once a week. And in Southeast Asia, where in the Theravada countries, there are lay people who are quite devoted and will attend a monastery for a day and a night and take the 8 precepts on a weekly basis. Quite impressive devotion in certain areas to the practices, not just of offering dana or food to the monks, but also listening to the Dhamma talks and meditating as well, including all-night sittings. In the northeast of Thailand, in the forest tradition, there's a regular attendance by lay people who participate with the monks weekly on what is called Wan Pra, which means Monk's Day. Wan is day and Pra is sort of reverends monks. And that occurs approximately once a week. And lay people from the villages and towns come, and they attend and wear white and take the 8 precepts and spend the entire night right till dawn meditating with the monks. And so this is the idea. But one can take it in one's personal life. Before I was a monk, I took 8 precepts for some years and became a hermit, a lay hermit. And it's a very simple, contemplative way to live. It's a challenge. If you're going to live with somebody else, in a marriage, there may be problems if you don't get everybody on. Maybe both of you are on 8 precepts. I don't know. If you're living alone, it's possible. It's not a. You get used to not having food after noon, and to do without any kind of entertainment or distractions and so forth is another thing. So you'll have to reflect on this to take that up. But it's a very serious practice. Basically, you're kind of being a monastic, a lay monk or a lay nun in the midst of the world. But if you can arrange it and you like it, then you can do it. But it's strictly voluntary, and not required. So that's my advice about that. I talk to various people about this sometimes, and it's quite an unusual lifestyle, really. But certain people it may be suitable for. Yes.
Our next question is from Wyla in San Juan Capistrano, California. Dear Ajahn, could you please explain what is meant by, quote, spiritual bypassing? Thank you.
Well, this is a term invented by some psychologist, and if you want a full definition of it, you would have to ask that person. I think, if I recall, somebody gave me a book it's called Spiritual Bypassing or something. I haven't read it, but it's. I think the author was a psychologist in California. Now, California is a hotbed of spiritual practices across the entire possible spectrum. There's a lot of Buddhists and mindfulness and this and that, of various types of things that might appeal to a person. So this is one of the things you have to be wary of. When you select spiritual paths, quite often you select it according to your tastes. And your tastes, at the beginning of a spiritual path, you're at the maximum ignorance. So you're trusting your least amount of knowledge to select something that appeals to you. And spiritual paths, especially the Buddhist spiritual path, imposes kind of unworldly demands on you against the normal stream of worldly values. And quite often it seems to be alienating and so forth, but that's the only way to solve some problems that are intrinsic to trying to find happiness in very shallow and temporary sensory experiences, relationship experiences, ownership experiences, little, like exciting adventures in the world and so forth. This is not really what the spiritual practice is about, and a lot of people they can't conceive of happiness outside of those kind of values. So I imagine that psychologist was probably getting a lot of people from this New Age and Buddhism light and mindfulness and Sufi dancing and all this kind of stuff, yoga and looking for a better figure and things. So, and they were not happy, and they're saying, I'm still not happy. I went on a, So he's thinking, okay, well, you haven't dealt with your basic problems here. And you're bypassing it by trying to do it at a spandex yoga class, So he might be right in some cases, but certainly not on a serious spiritual path. There's a lot of psychologists who are impressed with Buddhist practice and indeed are Buddhist practitioners. There's psychologists and psychiatrists and philosophers and all kinds of people that the higher demands of their mental well-being are met through true practices in the Buddhist field. which are not adequately dealt with by mere psychology. So psychotherapy is not, the goals of psychotherapy in general are not the goals of Buddhism. Psychotherapy, of course, is a modern invention. You go and talk to a person, and they have opinions. And of course, they have a whole spectrum of opinions. Therapists have a variety of ideas about how you should solve your problem. And who is the central authority behind all psychotherapy? Or like, where's this come from? If you're asking a Christian about it, like, it comes from God. But if you're asking a psychotherapist about it, I hope they don't say it comes from God. It comes from some guy with a PhD in 1982 that came up with a therapy and seemed to work, or whatever. It's a smorgasbord of ideas. Not dismissing all the ideas, but psychology and psychotherapy, and you can see schools lasting only 10 years sometimes, and dissolving and being replaced by a new theory and so forth. So the whole idea that spirituality can't answer some of these questions that require psychotherapy or something is not all that acceptable an idea. It depends on your spiritual practice, whether it's serious, well directed by somebody, a spiritual person who is competent to begin with and can help you. So this is the quagmire of around this question of what this so-called spiritual bypassing is. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Holly in San Jose, California, United States. Thank you for your insight into healing from trauma by being hit by a car. Would you please provide more wisdom regarding coping with body contemplation when feeling disgust for it? I have gashes on my face and bruising on broken bones, and sometimes feel like I should have died rather than face this pain. I am also angry to have bills coming in caused by a hit-and-run driver.
Well, to some degree, if you're angry about all these bills coming in by hit-and-run driver, you're lying down in the road again and letting him drive over you, so don't do that, dear. Just don't. You can't afford to be angry. Anger is another form of illness. It's an illness that you impose on yourself. So especially when you're not well, you can't afford to be angry. And actually, there's no time in life that you can really afford to be angry. It doesn't help. In the ordinary world, you can understand why people are angry about these things, but it's not truly a rational response to situations. When your poor body has been bashed around, it needs loving kindness, it needs patience, it needs care and concern, and not aversion to it. You're not inspecting the body with a negative because it's all blotched and bruised and so forth. That the Buddhist detachment from the body is that this is the nature. It's true that it's the nature, it's fragile and so forth, but the Buddha is very much on taking care of it. Although it can be a burdensome task when you have illnesses and so forth, and some people have lifetime series of illnesses. It's an amazing burden. But the only proper response is to have goodwill and take in a kindly attitude, in other words, to be a mother to yourself, to be a nurse to yourself, and with compassion and goodwill to nurse the body back to well-being and health to the degree that is possible. And to especially avoid contemplating anger nursing anger towards the person who did it and the bills and the medical establishment. Don't do that. It makes it worse, not better. So this is the attitude. It's a 180 degrees off of what ordinary people talk about, but it will improve the situation drastically. If you listen to me right now and you just drop that whole anger thing, all the resentment stuff, take a deep breath and try to bring some goodwill and loving kindness and determination to be a good doctor to this helpless patient. And you are both the doctor, the kindly doctor, and the patient. And you be a good patient and a good doctor. Okay.
Next question is from Susan in San Diego, California, United States. Dear Ajahn Sona, in your talk on equanimity, you said the ancient yogis found without the hindrances, humans are in a state of joy. How is the Buddhist path different than that yogic path?
Well, I think that anybody who stops harassing themselves will return to a state of lightness of being, of ease, and joy naturally arising. I think you can see it in a puppy. If you hit a puppy, if you don't treat a puppy right, they cower and whine and are afraid. And if you stop that and pet them instead and go out and take them for a walk and play with them, you see joy burst into being. If it's a cat, if it's a puppy, if it's a horse, if it's any of these, any animal, and let alone a child. So if a child is abused and violence is directed towards it, or heavy oppression, then you will see they're not happy. So they're harassed. And if you stop that and treat them with kindness, you'll see them jumping up and down and leaping around and rolling in the grass and natural joy. So all of these things are not beings. They're mind in general. So the mind is we don't understand. We have a mind, and we mistakenly say my mind and so forth, but it's really a universal process which we don't know where it came from, how it really works, except that if we impose fear, anger, aversion, longing, greed, negative types of things, the 5 hindrances in general, on ourselves, we are both the victim and the abuser. We are abusing ourselves, and we won't be happy. And if we stop that, we just make a decision, why am I doing this to myself? I wouldn't do this to anybody else anyway, or you might even do it to other people, but you stop doing it to yourself and to other people. You stop creating the illness of anger and the debt of desire. Desire is a form of going into debt, of being below zero. Agitation and sloth, these things, and needless doubt, being trapped in impossible doubts. To stop doing this is to, the mind, it's just its universal nature is to be unburdened, and so the Buddha talks about it being intrinsically luminous, radiant, when it's not being harassed. So the sun comes out. When the clouds are not there, the sun just appears. Sun's always there, but it's covered by the clouds. And so when there's no clouds, the sun is there, and it's a universal experience. Sometimes it's not there. It's always there, because its nature is luminous, and the mind's nature is luminous as well, when not harassed. So whether it was the ancient yogis or the Buddhists or anybody, any contemplative religion or any smart person, intelligent, sort of wise person, they'd have discovered this, that when you don't inflict harassments on yourself, that you feel better. It's joyful. Yeah. Okay, next.
Next question from the live chat is from John in Toronto, Canada. Is it useful for a Theravadin Buddhist to learn about vibrational frequencies, energy, and chakras? Did the Buddha ever mention these terms or anything similar in the suttas?
No, not in the suttas at all. But he does describe joy and certain types of desires, and any ordinary person locates these things in their bodies. There's some things that are intellectual, that involve sort of up in the head, and there's some things that are of the heart, and some things are of the lower drives, etc. And you feel these things. I think all languages have words for certain types of drives and so forth. But the Buddha did not use any yogic terms like chakras. I mean, except for, of course, the Dhamma chakra, the wheel of becoming, and the wheel of Dhamma. But these are not what the yogic schools, which are relating to these wheels at certain locations in the body. So it's not boring. But later schools of Buddhism, quite often, the northern schools, some of the sort of Mahayana type schools, adopt some of these terms into later so-called sutras. These are long after the historical Buddha has passed away. There is a lot of blending back and forth between Hindu teachings and Buddhism. So Hindu teachings, Vedic teachings, are influenced by Buddha, and later schools of Buddhism have all kinds of Brahmanic and Vedic threads woven into them as well. The so-called Theravada is an early school, but it has commentaries going on into, for 2,000 years afterwards. So I don't necessarily define myself as Theravada, but I'm more interested in the Pali Canon, the earliest suttas we can find, and giving them authority over any later commentaries or anything like that. So in those early suttas, you do not find any references to these chakras, etc. It might help, I'm not dismissing them, but they don't appear to be necessary to the Buddhist practice, or the Buddha would have, played it up quite a bit, yeah.
Next question is from I Want to Paycheck. I want to pay back. Charlie in Czech Republic. Dear Ajahn, sometimes I wonder if the Buddha taught jhanas to lay people. In some ways, jhana practice seems to be in fundamental opposition to the role of a householder in life. How can we aim towards jhanas without creating tension and cognitive dissonance around it?
It's a good question. Very good. Charlie in Czechoslovakia. I want to pay back. A paycheck, kind of, that works. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, so, yeah, it's a good question. So, jhana should not be underestimated. It is a very high demand on consciousness, and it involves a lot. It requires withdrawal. It's a mental withdrawal from the sensory world of sight, sound, smells, taste, touches, and even discursive thought processes. Some of the first jhana can involve the application of some discursive activity around very limited spiritual topics. But to go beyond that into the second jhana, now there's various categorizations of jhanas. The second jhana, in the general sense, the second jhana is where thought, discursive activity is reduced or eliminated. And to go deeper there's no discursive activity at all. And this is, you see in Buddhist history that by the time of this commentary called the Visuddhimagga, approximately the 5th century of the Christian era, the AD, about 1,000 years after the Buddha, they're saying that, this jhana, especially on the breath meditation, attaining jhana is really hard. Even for the monks, there's hardly any monks that can manage to do this. It's a daunting task. But at the time of the Buddha, you see that there's more, seems to be more available. And you have accounts of all kinds of monks going into profound levels of jhana. Some householders, yes. In fact, of course, householders are attaining enlightenment at the time of the Buddha as well. First, second, third stage of enlightenment. By the 4th stage, generally speaking, that what the suttas say, by the 4th, like full enlightenment, one cannot remain in the household life. One automatically ends up in the robes. There are no sustained, fully enlightened householders. That it cancels all elements of reasons for staying in the household life. But up to the 3rd stage, there are householders who, at the time of the Buddha, attained the 3rd stage of enlightenment, and they would have access to jhana, but they're not ordinary people, and they're not living ordinary householder lives. They're celibate. They're completely celibate, automatically celibate, have no worldly desires, but they're remaining in the household life only because of certain that people are dependent on them for their lives. So here's an example of a person, Gatikara, the potter, who actually attained the 3rd stage of enlightenment, who would have easily had access to the jhanas. He had to remain in the household life because both of his parents were elderly and blind. And if he went off to the robes, they would probably die without his support. So he remained as a potter. So he made pots and left them on a table beside the road, and people could pay what they want for it. And he would take that money and buy food for himself and his parents. And that's a householder can get to that stage. They're basically living like a monastic, though. So if you want to develop the jhanas, it's a serious investment in practice. It doesn't mean that you must have eliminated all worldly attachments and so forth. Still some anger and desire can remain, and it's possible to suspend this for periods of time and attain to this jhana. But it's a commitment to a way of life. Yes, it may cause dissonance. You really are withdrawing from the sort of the lighter values, cheering, sports on, and dancing and singing and all this kind of stuff it can't be the meaning of your life. If you're a serious spiritual practitioner, those things fall into the background, and then you might have to deal with people who demand that you participate in that kind of stuff, and that's where your dissonance comes from. Your cognitive dissonance comes from. Yeah, this is the problem. This spiritual progress and path sometimes makes conflict with ordinary worldly values of how people live. And when you change that, they often resist your development. And you end up in a awkward situation with them. And that's kind of why some people fear to progress on their spiritual path, because they realize, well, this leads me right out of being an ordinary person. And then what am I going to do? And so this is the journey. This is the hero's journey. You're actually, you're going to lose some relationships because those relationships are very based on worldly values. And you have to decide whether you're going to go ahead or not. And the jhana will push you. If you start to get these good experiences in an internal world, you start to lose interest in the outer world. And this can create some conflict. But you want to grow or you not want to grow? Okay, let's go on.
Next question is from Vincenzo in Alessandria, Italy. During the first months of my practice, it seemed that the mind already knew the way to go deep. Now, after nearly 12 years, the impediments are subtle. There is certainly disappointment at not understanding how to re-enter that door. Any advice and encouragements?
Yeah, that is not an uncommon experience. It's called beginner's luck. So you go to your first retreat and you get like, wow, you get in maybe into the edge of jhana even. You get a deep cleansing experience and you suddenly have a whole different view of how life can be lived. And this is wonderful, but you go away and you can't wait to get back to your next retreat because you're going to do this again. And you get back there and it doesn't happen. And you can't remember exactly how it happened. And then the next retreat still doesn't, because you blundered in with beginner's luck. You blundered into the right door. So there's 358 doors there. And you picked the green door and you went in there. So, I mean, how did you manage this? Just chance, karma, whatever. And then you can't remember which hallway you turned down and how you got there. And this is plainly described in the suttas, and that's the first instruction. If you get into a good state, don't be preoccupied with the good state, the samadhi state, the beautiful mind state. Be preoccupied in making a map of how to get back there. So they give a beautiful simile. I think it's in the Visuddhimagga, this late commentary, that some cows are roaming around and on the range, and they blunder into this meadow of very beautiful grass and a pond, and then they hear the bell ringing that brings them back to the central corral, and they go back there, and then the next day they think, oh, let's go back to that pond and that beautiful lush grass. But they can't remember where it is. They didn't pay attention to where it was. They just went back to the where the farmer feeds them grass and so forth. So they can't get back there. So the commentary says, when you get to the meadow, the beautiful meadow, make a map. Don't be too concerned about staying there or its intrinsic beauty, but how you got there. So how are you going to get back there? Now you've lost the map. You don't know how to, you just have a faint memory of it. How are you going to get back there? Well, you go back to the Eightfold Path because it shows you the preliminaries of how to get to the eighth factor. So there are 7 factors which lead to the eighth factor. The eighth factor is the beautiful mind, samadhi. And it is, so you go back and you look over your views of the world, how things operate. This is called right view. And then you look over, do I have right intention? Have I abandoning ill will, aversion, cruelty, and am I still preoccupied with collecting things? Or am I allowed to reduce and simplify my life and not be so longing for increasing things? Is my speech moderate and honest? Are my actions ethical? Is my livelihood ethical? And then do I understand what right effort is? The effort to prevent and remove the 5 hindrances, and the effort to cultivate and sustain positive mental states. And then do I understand what right mindfulness is? Where to direct my attention, how to direct my attention, and what it is I'm seeking to be mindful of. And then that should result in this samadhi, the right concentration, which is the thing that you experienced, the beautiful thing that you experienced. So that's how this time you will be very determined to make a good map of it. If you manage to get in there, you'll understand, okay, I have to have the right preliminaries to this.
Next question is from Clay in Colorado, United States. Does vibhava-tanha apply strictly to an individual's desire for their own non-becoming of a certain identity, or can the desire for the non-arising of an imagined future scenario or situation also be categorized as vibhava-tanha? Thank you.
Yeah, so let me define vibhava-tanha. We've talked about it in question and answers before, but vibhava-tanha. Bhava is existence, sometimes called becoming, but I would prefer existence. And V is the absence of that. So it's the desire for the absence of existence. And it can take many forms. When when people are depressed, they often sleep 16 or 18 hours a day because it's very painful to be conscious. So that's a form of vibhava-tanha, which takes the form of sleep. So you desire to be non-existent by sleeping all the time. Or drugs, especially drugs which reduce consciousness. So there are some drugs accelerate consciousness. So there are party drugs and stimulant drugs, and those are bhava-tanha. You want more existence, so you're going to go and dance all night with your methamphetamine or whatever it is. So, and then heroin and opioids are quite often vibhava drugs. They're the escape from the painful nature of consciousness. And then, of course, suicide is the ultimate vibhava-tanha, the annihilation of that. So if you're trying to annihilate things, aspects of yourself, and in fact, this could be, people want to annihilate their present identity. So sometimes they just quit their jobs, or they get a divorce, or some people even go to the extreme of vanishing. So they can't get out of their dilemma, their situation. So they fake their own death. And now without having killed themselves, they kill their identity. I think this is happening quite a bit in general culture now. The very idea of identity is very dispensable. So you can sort of decide who you are now. And there's a form of vibhava-tanha. You don't want to be who you are, so you decide you're somebody else. You decide spontaneously that I'm not this anymore, I am that. And that means that you don't like the situation, the identity that's being imposed on you. Now, your idea is like you don't want certain things to happen in the future. You feel that your life is going towards something that you don't want it to arrive at. And you're asking, is that vibhava-tanha? Do I want to annihilate that destiny? Yeah, to a certain degree, you want to annihilate your future identity. But at the same time, it also could be the opposite. You want to become something else. You don't want your fate to move towards this destiny that you don't like. But if you want it to move in a direction that you like, then that's bhava-tanha. That's the thirst for existence as another type of identity. So that's an answer. Some of you may not have totally understood about this, but it's a handy tool to know. I mean, this is part of psychiatry or psychotherapy from the time of Freud as well. He introduces this death wish as a kind of a motivator. You'll find people that keep injuring themselves or putting themselves in dangerous situations, they kind of underlying death wish. So this is vibhava-tanha. By the way, I think Freud got it through Buddhism, but not because he knew anything about Buddha. It comes through a philosopher named Schopenhauer, a German philosopher in the early, in the 19th century, who did know about Buddhism and knew about these drives through Buddhism and wrote about it. And he was influential on a lot of other European philosophers, Nietzsche as well, and Freud is influenced by Nietzsche and by Schopenhauer. And he didn't just invent the death wish. He really, although he might have wanted to claim that he sort of intuited it, but it's being handed to him by European philosophers who are getting it really probably from Buddhist sources. That's a little side note on this. Okay, next.
Next question from the live chat is from Christelle in Ontario, Canada. How do Buddhist teachers recognize potential sincere students amid a flood of bandwagon jumpers?
People who are jumping on the bandwagon, the Buddhist bandwagon. Well, it's interesting. Buddhism is it's kind of pop, it's popular. And it's a bit hip to be a Buddhist. Quite often people are shocked to actually find that we're pretty square. At least, like there's various schools of Buddhism. Some are more flamboyant, but mine, as you can see, brown robes, same thing every week, nothing, same haircut. It's a very conservative in some ways, not that kind of conservative that don't conservationist. We're conservationists. We're conserving beautiful teachings from the past, but that have a high demand on ethical behavior of how you think, how you speak, and how you act. And so a lot of people don't understand that. They show up for retreats that have the B word in them. By the way, the B word, Buddha, is economically useful. So all kinds of people, lay people, realize that if they can't just advertise themselves as Mary from Arkansas or Billy from New Jersey, I'm a spiritual teacher. So if they say, I'm teaching Buddhism or the Buddha way or something like that, it's easier to advertise or something like that. So that happens. The B word seems to sell. But it's quite a what is the word? It's pretty well anything, a grab bag, a fruit salad of ideas that are really very little to do with the Buddha, the historical Buddha, as far as we know what the historical Buddha said. There's a website called Fake Buddha Quotes. There's a huge number of fake Buddha quotes. So yes, it's there are all kinds of things. I urge you to keep your eyes wide open. The teachings of the historical Buddha, as found in the Pali Canon, have a great emphasis on ethics. There is no manipulation. There is no transgression of sexual boundaries or any of this kind of stuff. It's a very high ethic, and if you go into schools, etc., that don't have these boundaries and ethics, then you're in the wrong. You're not in the school of the historical Buddha. So, in brief, that's a little answer.
Next question from the live chat is from JCKM01's channel. As a layperson, can one enjoy entertainment such as listening to music, watching reality TV, etc.? Or did Buddha advise outside of making a living, only spending time on meditation and Dhamma talks? And regarding right livelihood, what about those who make theater, TV, etc.? Didn't Buddha give a Dhamma talk advising against this? Should one change careers to be able to walk the Eightfold Path, quote, better?
Well, for monastics, you can't see if there's a lot of, if monks are going to discotheques, is there such a thing as a discotheque anymore? If you're going dancing, and I mean, it doesn't make a good impression. If I'm out on the golf course, in my robes there. No. So monks have a very clear and precise thing called the Vinaya, which restricts your behavior. But it's a very specialized lifestyle. It's just optimized to help you. And it eliminates all of these frivolous things. But there are no such precepts for lay people, except when you're in the monastery with the monks. So you can't be having a barbecue at 6 in the evening while the monks are abstaining from eating. You're creating a lot of smells and temptations. So if you come to the monastery, you have to skip dinner as well. And you can't be listening to your music because it's going to disturb the contemplative atmosphere. So he just tries to set up something like a library. If you go to a library, you just, librarians always, shh, you can't talk, you can't play your music. Maybe you can do it on headphones or something. You can't disturb others. It's a quiet environment. So it's something like that. You can't be playing tennis down the middle of the bookshelves. So think of it as a library. And you're going to be living in a library. As a monk, you're going to be living in a library, but you as a layperson are going to be visiting a library, but you are not expected to live like that your whole life. It'd be very awkward and very specialized to live like that. But at the same time, if you become very serious about your meditation, what happens is that you just lose interest in a lot of the distractions that people indulge in. Your mind just doesn't appreciate things that it used to appreciate that are kind of frivolous and shallow. And by the way, this can create some confusion in your life, actually. If you lose interest in the normal activities that people are interested in, then you don't want to go and do things that people that used to want to go and do, and people want to drag you into. And this makes friction in your relationships, etc. So spiritual path will change you. And it changes you whether you like it or not, and you become a different person. And it's like growing up as a kid. You used to play with bicycles, now you're interested in girls. And and your brother, who wants to just go on a bicycle, is not interested in girls. And you want to go and see the girl next door. And this is inconvenient for your brother. Or the opposite, where you used to be interested in girls, now you don't care, you just want to go for a walk. So when you start these spiritual practices, it changes you in ways that lead out of ordinary worldly interests. And you don't really have a choice in this. You can't just choose to go back. There's no going back from it. As your changes occur, you just can't go back. And so for the layperson, I think you just want to meditate, listen to Dhamma, and then see what naturally falls away. And you will find that your desires and your activities just change by naturally. If you become a monk, whether you like it or not, you are forced to abandon a lot of things and behave in a certain way, whether you like it or not, whether you're ready or not. Here you go. All the rules apply to you. And you do that voluntarily because you want to go on the fast track. Yeah. You don't want to go on the bus. You want to get on a motorcycle, a one-person motorcycle, and go at 100 miles an hour. Or you can wait for the bus and go with everybody else. Okay, so that's a little answer to that. Next
question is from Marcy in Simpsonville, South Carolina, United States. What do you think about lucid dreaming, astral projecting as a spiritual practice? I haven't heard you discuss this topic. I know Tibetan Buddhism has dream yoga, as part of their teachings practice, but not sure about Theravada Buddhism. I've even wondered if people practicing meditation aren't actually astral projecting while sitting when describing the jhanas.
Well, yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about these things and, investigating that whole area myself. And so the Buddha does talk about, he says, there's something interesting. He says, there is a body within the body, and you can pull this body out. So have you, grass, as a kid, did you ever slip grass out of there's a little tender sheath, out of the sheath. So you pull out of the sheath of the grass, and there's a tender bit you can nibble on it. So the Buddha describes it this way. He says, there's a body inside your body, and you can pull it out of the body, and it can travel and so forth. So this is kind of your astral body traveling. So the Buddha actually talks about this, and he talks about visiting. You can go and see other dimensions. You can move around, and this is done in samadhi rather than in sleep. But you also see many reports of people apparently going out of their body in sleep. So what do they call it? Out-of-body experiences. There's a famous book called Out-of-Body Experiences, and it's kind of a rediscovery of ancient things that were known. And so I think in Tibetan Buddhism they do dream body meditation and so forth, lucid dreaming, etc. There's no instructions for the Buddhist, the Theravada, for lucid dreaming. However, if you want to change the contents of your dreams, the practice of loving kindness specifically says, if you practice loving kindness deeply, frequently, often, successfully, repetitively, like 11 emphasis on how much you got to do this, here's what will happen. One sleeps well, one wakes well, one does not have bad dreams. And what happens is also that you start to have good dreams, heavenly dreams. So loving kindness, this profound friendliness towards the beings that share the universe with you. When you really get this feeling going, you are accessing the divine. And they call them viharas. So this is called a Brahma vihara. Brahma meaning sort of a deity dwelling, the dwelling of the gods. And you can access this in your dreams and while you're awake. So not only while you're awake, but even it will dispel these negative dreams and bring you into visions of beautiful, extremely beautiful symmetries and palatial surroundings full of light and so forth. So they're very similar to the descriptions of heavens, you know. There are many descriptions of heaven in the Buddhist texts, and of course they're gorgeous beyond any worldly comparison. But you enter it through this divine emotion. It's by this emotional training that you enter into these visions of a full-blown, what do they call this? Something reality, fictional reality, virtual reality. What we're doing now, so you put on these goggles and everything, and you can enter into these virtual reality, three-dimensional kind of things. But the mind can do this, and it does this through emotions. And by the way, right, walking around, you can be in hell if your consciousness gets distorted in a certain way. You can walk around this world, and what you see is hell. Nothing but fear and horror. Or you can see beauty in this world, consciously walking around, and in your dreams. So lots of people know what hell is in their dreams. And there are people who enter heaven in their dreams as well, and in the waking consciousness. So you can... So how the Buddha prescribes it is not practicing in your dreams. It's practicing while you're awake, consciously practicing these divine dwellings of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And those consciousness that you experience while awake will go into your dream life as well. That, in brief, is about dreams. So I think we have come to the end of our session this week. And we will be back next week with another Q&A.